Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your host, Des Kennedy.
Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Momentum. Don't forget our website, momentumaustralia.org, and don't forget our care line, 1-800-000-MEN, for a safe and confidential conversation. Guys, don't forget that number. It's easy to remember, 1-800-000-MEN. And we have back with us this week Peter Jackel. And Peter was talking last week in depth about why Christians should be involved in politics. And I guess the focus of our attention in that was why we should vote a particular way or why we should vote at all. But we want to swing it around a little bit and talk about Christians who decide to stand for politics and what the rationale for that would be. So first of all, welcome back, Peter.
Thank you, Des. Lovely to be back with you.
That's great. And so talk to us about the rationale and maybe even your own rationale for standing for politics.
Right. So last week we talked a bit about the cultural mandate, which is upon the Christian believer, and that is to influence the world around them, whatever sphere of influence you have, by the fragrance of your life, but also the words, the values, the principles, the standards that you uphold based upon your Christian faith, right? And so we can look at it on a micro level and say that you're going to influence your kids, your family members, your wife, your spouse, whatever, your partner. You're going to influence the wider community, and on a macro level, maybe even the nation. And so that's the mandate upon the Christian. And it's interesting when you look at Paul talking, well, first of all, you come back to the words of Jesus in Matthew 28. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And as we mentioned last week, oftentimes people stop there at that scripture, right? But the next part of it says, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's so important, isn't it? Because it leads to everything else.
That's right. And so Jesus is commanding us to teach the things that Jesus has taught to us, to them.
Yes.
And so the things in Jesus' words that we have taken on, his moral standards, his moral values, his moral principles, we are to teach that to people. And this is ultimately what changes and brings a culture in line with the standards and principles of God. And that therefore breeds and grows beautiful fruit in the culture itself. But here's the thing about we as a people of God. Jesus talks about, upon this rock I will build my church. Paul also uses the word church in talking about the believers. That word ecclesia is actually a Greek word that defines a group of people who existed in the city of Athens, and they were a people that had cultural responsibility and cultural influence.
Right.
And so here Paul is talking to us and using the same word, you are the ecclesia. Yeah. You are the ones who are deemed with the task and responsibility of influencing culture.
Yes.
And so that's the role of the believer in the church. That's why we should consider getting involved in politics, because everything is flowing from political decisions that are being made and legislated ideas are put into law, which then govern the conduct of that nation and the people within that nation.
And if you don't have a moral compass that is focused on morality and, saving lives and the respect for lives and the respect for life, you've no basis on which to build.
No.
Right, which is why society goes, because they're not getting the opportunity to hear the Christian worldview.
That's right.
And so it is important that we stand up and make a stand.
And that's really obvious in areas like the dignity of life, where we're protecting the unborn in the womb. And we're not killing our offspring, and we're not advocating for the killing of the oldies who are, in the later stages of life. But it also the moral principles that Jesus teaches are about things like, how do we treat those we're having conflict with?
Yes.
How do we treat our enemies? Do we kill? Do we lie? Do we cheat? Do we steal? So it's actually, it's beyond, like, there's a lot of red button issues which, when we're talking about moral imperatives, we tend to focus on, the sexual ethic issue, sexual identity, transgenderism, homosexuality, dignity of life issues, traditional view of marriage.
Yeah.
But we mustn't forget that Jesus is also talking to us about things like love, loving your neighbor, treating each other well, treating your neighbor as you want to be treated yourself, right?
Yeah. Honor,
forgiveness,
all those words. Yeah.
honor, telling the truth, being a truth teller.
Yes.
And so you have to think about how much a culture degrades and how social pathologies just accumulate and are amplified when you step away from the way that God has taught us to live with one another and to treat one another. And you have to think about all those things that degrade and just literally decay and eat away at a community, eat away at a nation.
Yeah.
And when you have completely fully formed decayed nation, then your leaders can't even tell the truth.
Yeah, no, that's right.
They're corrupt.
Oh, yeah.
And the corruption just bleeds down.
For example, they don't know what a woman is.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, this is a simple example,
and
right?
they're so adrift of the principles of truth, objective truths, that now they are, perpetuating a lie by legislating lies and forcing you to conform to that lie.
So there you were. To bring it back to you a little bit.
Sure.
So there you were, living in this world, right? Saying all this stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
So what was the trigger for you that made you go from, look, I'm interested in politics, I know how I want to vote, I know how we need to influence that, to someone who said, you know what, I'm going to put my hand up. I'm going to be held accountable. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, right? How was that step for you? How did you take that step? Because there may be men listening who, are really interested in politics, but that is a sort of armchair discussion rather than something that affects their life.
Well, I think the the thing that motivated me, Des, was anger.
Right.
I looked at the quality of leadership that are ruling over us in this country.
Yes.
And I was just aghast, and have been for years now. I think you get to a stage where you realize that your life is being directly influenced and affected by decisions that these people are making, and these are just people at the end of the day.
Yes,
that they have this exalted position over you, where they are determining the way that you live your life, and they are some of the most detestable reprobates you can imagine.
Yes.
And
that's a good one, Fred.
And I would listen to them arguing and talking in chamber, question time, and they would refuse to answer simple questions because of, expediency, or they don't want to be embarrassed by actually saying what the truth, saying the truth. And people with vested interests, just the corruption that has gone on. And so I just sat back and thought, I think there's a better class of polity here. And, we as Christians have got the answers to many of these of life's issues. In fact, maybe we've got the answers to all of life's issues through the scriptures and through the power of the Holy Spirit, and through having a bit of conviction and courage to stand up and talk about these things.
I think that's absolutely spot on, by the way.
So, I've always said, sometimes I counsel married people, and I talk about the blokes in the marriage, the husbands. There's 3 P's to think about: protector, provider, priest. You are the protector over your family and over your spouse. You're seeking to provide and look after the welfare of your family, and you are to be the priest, and that is inform spiritual matters with spiritual intelligence and understanding. And a nation is no different. It needs protectors to look after the welfare of the nation. It needs priests to be able to understand spiritual imperatives.
Priest in the generic term. as opposed to priests specifically in like the Catholic.
Yeah,
priests,
that's right. In a priestly role,
Yes.
you're going to have understanding of spiritual matters, and you may not talk that way, but you'd be a prayerful man bringing forth the counsel of God in winsome statements, in coherent arguments, and you'd be advocating for the principles of God.
Isn't it interesting that years ago, even before like my time in the early 1900s, there were men of God who stood up and were strong in their faith and were listened to. Whereas, could you name any of those? Billy Graham probably was one, and there may be one or two others. Charlie Kirk was one,
right,
who stood up and spoke long and hard about the Christian values of worldview.
Very strident in his Christian messaging.
And so that reinforces what you're saying in terms of if we can get people into politics. So your rationale for going into politics was to influence for good?
Absolutely. And to start to challenge some of these laws which are just destroying our nation. And so, there's, you can go down the rabbit hole on globalism and the whole thing about destroying our national identity as Australians and white guilt, feeling bad about who you are, feeling bad about your past and trying to pay reparations to whoever demands of you and all this kind of stuff, which just simply breaks down
the World Health
society.
Organization and United Nations, all those who want to have a negative influence on the country of Australia, for example.
So they need to break down a national identity. You can't love your country if they want to centralize power and govern over you from a central point. And so that's fundamentally what globalism is, centralized power, but they can't have nationalism. You can't be a nationalist who loves their country and who believes that you have values worth standing up for that are within your nation. And so, part of me looking on was saying, this is nonsense. People gave up their lives for this country, for the freedoms that we enjoy. The basic fundamental freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of religion. And here we are having all of these fundamental things being broken down right in front of us, and nobody's doing anything about it. So, it's time for me to get off the couch.
Take a bit of courage and
stand up, form an argument, make an argument, and at least I can say to my kids, I tried.
Yes, absolutely.
At the end of the day.
And it's more than that, right? Because you have an influence as well. And in taking the stand you did, even though you didn't get elected, in taking that stand, you were reaching people. People were aware of what you stood for.
Yeah, that's right.
Aware of those principles. So I honor you in doing that, by the way.
It was fascinating because I had an old gentleman come up to me at one of the polling booths and he said to me, looked at me in the face and said, "Why are you standing for family first? Why are you standing for politics?" And I said, well, family first, is this, that, and the other. And he said, no, I didn't ask you that. I asked you why you are standing. And then I thought, well, okay. And then I went into these reasons about a Christian moral imperative, the principles of God and forming better decisions around standards of God and moral, ethical values. Anyway, after 10 minutes of chatting, he said, you know what? I think after listening to you, I would vote for you. And I'm normally a Greens voter.
Wow.
So I managed to win him over, but then the kicker was he informed me with a bit of a twinkle. He said, sadly, I'm a UK citizen and I can't vote.
Oh, dear.
But had a lot of these kind of conversations, which are just, presenting coherent ideas that make sense, common sense values. But again, that's what God speaks because God is the author of objective truth, which ultimately comports to reality and makes common sense.
So we're going to take another short break. And then we're going to come back and talk about top-down, bottom-up change, which is a good principle in politics. So we're going to come back and talk about that. Guys, while we're on the break, don't forget website, momentumaustralia.org. Don't forget our social media platforms. And also don't forget our care line, 1-800-000-MEN. Have a look around the website. If you'd like to donate to Momentum to keep this ministry alive, that would be fantastic. That'd be really cool. We will be back shortly.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Hi, we're back with Momentum, and we have Peter Jackel with us, and we've been talking about all sorts of things in politics. We talked about why Peter decided to stand as a politician, and I honoured him in doing that. I think it was great that he stood up. But what do we want to achieve? At the end of the day, we as a Christian community want to see change, and positive change, and change that saves lives, and change that, respects babies in the womb, respects all those, older people, and even just a marriage of a husband and a wife, respecting those people and supporting those people in that effort. So tell us about how we can drive change in a political sense in our world.
Well, I think if we approach this from two different angles, one would be what I call a top-down approach, and the other one is the bottom-up approach. So the top-down approach is a political, having political aspirations and going into politics with a view to influence and inform culture with your biblical views and standards.
Right.
And so when it comes to the question, is it a good idea to kill your offspring in the womb? Well, you can form an argument about the dignity of life.
Yes.
And if enough people be drawn into that side of the debate, then you can legislate laws in the land that says we abolish abortion right throughout the entire nation. Now, imagine if we did that today. That would be a watershed moment in this nation's history, right?
Yes.
And every baby would be afforded the fundamental human rights of protection, life, and liberty.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a top-down approach, entering into politics with the view of influencing the laws of the land that are being, because let's face it, a lot of the laws are moral in nature.
Yes.
And we throw a lot of people that violate those moral laws into jails. Jails are filled with people that don't want to conform to a moral law that's been passed. But the problem with...
And just to explain that a little bit, I mean, that could be murdering somebody or attacking somebody.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything that's antisocial, essentially.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Anything generally that harms another person.
Yes.
But we have allowed certain things to harm other people, such as abortion,
other lives,
euthanasia, in the mutilation of children through transgenderism procedures, medical castration, all kinds of stuff, right? So that has been effected at a legislative level. And so the problem with morality being set by people who are adrift of a world view that's based and biblically informed means that you have a morality now which is driven by consensus.
Yes.
So basically, the politicians are looking to the people and saying, what do you want? And the people, because they are adrift of biblical principles, love their sin, and so they demand that their sin be accommodated by the laws of the land. We don't want to have to be forced to carry a baby in the womb, or we want to be able to marry anybody else, or maybe we want to marry as many people as we want, whatever.
Or my parents are getting so old that they're awkward and we want to
snuff them out and remove them from the picture.
Yeah.
Or we want to take a rich person's money and make it ours because there should be no rich people in the community. All these different ideas are being driven by consensus view. Yeah. And so that's a very, very dangerous position because you only need to look at Germany in World War II, and consensus moral values drove the destruction of the lives of millions of Christians, homosexuals, gypsies, Jews, all kinds of people suffered. So that's the top-down approach. We as Christians bring a Christian worldview into politics, and we agitate and advocate and argue for good, godly, principled laws to be installed and instituted into the nation. And that cannot but drive beautiful
outcomes
and bear beautiful fruit into the future. So that's a top-down approach. The bottom-up approach is the alternative way to view cultural change, societal change. And that's why it's really important that we as a as the people of God, understand the mandate that's upon our lives to be culture shapers.
Yes.
So we can never be shaped by the culture.
Yes.
Right? We have, if we're downstream of the culture, then we are being shaped by the culture, and the church is getting shaped by the culture.
Yeah.
But we, as the people of God, need to be upstream of the culture, and we actually inform culture and shape culture by our preaching, by our living, by our loving, by our forgiving, and all of that flows through into cultural changes. So that's the bottom-up approach. When you have a spiritual revolution in a nation, then you have a societal revolution, you have a cultural revolution, you have a moral revolution in the nation.
We're not even speaking about things that we can't describe. So, I mean, this is the real world we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Welsh revival, the men were out drinking, and society was broken really badly.
That's right.
And all of a sudden they had a revival where people, came to faith and towns were changed. And
That's right.
It's just like...
one of the funny stories out of that is even the donkeys were being spoken to kindly by their masters after they were born again.
Yeah,
and the donkeys didn't know what to do with that. They didn't obey. And
they
so the guys they weren't. They're right. But you can see this all around the world, right?
Yes.
And even in South America, there was massive social change because there was a spiritual revival, and to the degree that some places even had to shut down their jails because they had no use for them.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a true story. So I used to work for a secular charity, and they did not like Christianity. They were quite open about their objection towards Christianity. And here I am, a Christian sitting in this charity.
Yeah.
It was a secular charity, and they were talking about what drives societal change, and they nearly choked on the fact of talking about the South American change when the spiritual revolution came. It brought all these societal changes. So this is the bearing of good fruit.
Whenever Billy Graham came to Melbourne, I mean, the impact on Melbourne, because of the Christian influence and people becoming Christians was huge. Yeah, amazing.
That's right.
So you're absolutely right.
It drives down domestic violence. It drives up it drives up healthy families and healthy marriages, neighbors trying to get on, crime goes down, all kinds of stuff happens when we live life according to the way that God has decreed for us. So that's the bottom up and the top down approach. Yeah. I think we are to invade both those spaces.
Yes.
So bring good laws into the land, pray for righteous people to be given voices of prominence in powerful positions and influence. That's the top down approach. And pray for more people. What does Jesus say? The harvest is ready, but the workers are few.
Yeah,
pray for more workers to go into the harvest and to lead people to Christ. And if eventually, if 1 million people, if 5 million, if 10 million people come to Christ in a nation, that will force change upwards into the polity anyway.
That's absolutely right, because it becomes a power block, doesn't it? In a political sense.
Absolutely. They will be looking for leaders who are going to be in line with their views and principles. Yeah.
So we've had a great discussion about politics and Christian and politics and why it's important and so forth. And I guess, there'll be men listening and they'll say, that's all well and good, but we've got an election coming up, in Victoria, wherever it is. Who do I vote for? So what would I don't necessarily need you to
give a party endorsement,
but in principle.
Yeah, so the basic principles I look at, I'm looking for honest people who are closely as possible aligned to my values and beliefs, my moral standards. I'm going to be particularly looking for, and some of these are litmus tests, they reveal a lot about the person. If a person thinks it's okay to kill a baby in the womb, especially late-term abortion, then that speaks to me a lot. That reveals to me a lot about what that person believes with the dignity of life. Yeah. And if they're willing to do that to a baby, that is one of the most vulnerable of our community.
Way of defending itself.
Most vulnerable in our community. If you're willing to treat them that way, then what are you willing to do to me?
Yes.
If you perhaps don't like my views or opinions, you could turn on me. So I think that tells us a lot about a person. So there's some of those red button issues. If you can't tell me what a woman is, you're a fool.
Yes, that's
and you're
exactly
not worth
right.
ruling over me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's no way you get.
I mean, that's just bare bones truth, right?
Yeah,
that's objective truth. If you can't even make truthful statements, are you a person that's committed to truth? Are you a person that's committed to loyalty? Are you truly an advocate for the right, righteousness, godliness, goodness? Do you care about this nation? Are you are you concerned about the welfare of the people of this nation over your rich buddies or your or globalist connections? I'm going to be looking at all those kinds of things, and we do have those people, good people who can be sought out and voted for and can be found amongst the communities, but a community of candidates.
Yes.
But you have to do a bit of research to find them.
One of the things that people would say, and we'll close shortly after this piece of discussion, that somebody who's got those right values and has maybe a Christian background and understands and accepts those values, as soon as they get into politics, there is such a opportunity or a threat that they would have to compromise and not stand up for their convictions. What would you say to people that think that?
Look, I've always said to people that you live and die by your convictions. Your convictions define you as a person, and they're worth giving everything up for.
Yes.
If you don't have convictions worth standing for, then you'll stand for anything.
Yes, that's a good point.
Right?
Yes.
And so if I'm a politician going into politics, I will be voted in based on my convictions and my beliefs and my views, my principles. And those are the things that I would carry through in my political life.
Yeah.
Now, in the area of compromise, I've always talked about closed fist, open hand.
Yeah.
Closed fist are the things which I will not negotiate on. They are the things that define me, and they are conviction-based things. And there are other things which I will compromise on, and they are in the open.
Because they don't impact people.
No, well, they're not moral judge. They don't require moral judgment, right?
Yeah.
So it might be taxation law or something, something else. Maybe issues around immigration or visas or whatever that we're debating at the time. So I think you just have to be very clearly. You have to very clearly define in your own mind what your convictions are, and that you have the courage to stand by those convictions. And here's a little takeaway, Des, that cowardice is contagious as courage is contagious.
Yes.
So when we stand in courage for our convictions, others will stand with us.
That's so true. And listen, Peter, thanks so much for your time across these two shows. It's been a real joy. And I hope all the men who are listening, appreciate what it is to stand, and the fact that you do have to make a stand, and you have to, be strong in your faith and in your principles and so forth. So it's been really good. Thank you so much, man.
Pleasure.
It's been good.
Good on you, Des.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org.